For much of the Northeast and parts of the Midwest, it was back to basics today. The sun providing the light, feet the transportation. Day 2 of the blackout of 2003. More than 4 million people were still without power from Massachusetts to Michigan and in Canada.
People who have nothing are looking for anything they can find. And without more aid, what little there is will run out soon.
Equally unbelievable, winds of at least 80 miles an hour blew out the bright lights that usually dominate the Manhattan skyline.
A water main broke, leaving New Orleans without drinking water, and the flooding here is getting worse.
I was scared that I was going to drown. It was just crazy. Had a hard time getting to out of my house.
And it's not just gas running low.
We are, over the next few days, going to have to work out some procedures to make sure people can get food.
We're asking people to shelter in place, in other words, to stay indoors.
The cost of food is going up too. So much so, some stores are even rationing some products.
These scores of people behind me, they're still stranded in the dark, in the cold.
Storms, about 1,000 storms kicked off on Friday, and then we had 800 yesterday.
More than 3 million homes are in the dark and without air conditioning amid sweltering temperatures.
Maryland, West Virginia, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. are all under the state of emergency.
According to self-reliance expert Frank Belcastro, these are the times we live in. Frank advocates planning, preparedness, and having a community who's prepared for tough times. He has dedicated his life to mastering the skills to not only survive, but flourish in challenging times. Today he's sharing the lost art of living a self-sufficient life. Please welcome Mr. Frank Belcastro.
Thank you very, very, very much. I really want to say right off the bat, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to be here, to listen to what I have to say. Hopefully, you'll pick up a few things, maybe a few pointers. We'll get into some specifics, some of the things that I've done with my family. But more than anything today, I think mostly what I'm going to be talking about is the overall philosophy of self-reliance. And we'll just take it step by step and go through it. I got to say right off the bat that this is all relatively new to me, especially using this kind of a setup, the PowerPoint, the screen here. This is the very first time that I've done anything like this. And hopefully I'll do okay, and you guys will all bear with me, and together I'll be learning something, and hopefully you guys will be learning something too. I think the best way to start is to tell you a little bit about myself and my family and the kinds of things that we've been doing, and again, touch upon the philosophy of self-reliance. It needs to be said right off the bat that really, I could be any of you that are sitting out there in the audience today. I'm really not that much different than any one of you here, especially if any of you do have an interest in trying to strive towards, begin working towards starting that process for a self-reliant type of a lifestyle, or at least to be a lot less reliant. Those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. I really am just a regular family guy. Like it says up here, a father, a husband. Been interested for many, many years in a self-sufficient lifestyle, and very, very, very concerned for quite a long time about how reliant we have become as a society, as a culture. My family and I, as you can see from the photographs that are up here now, my wife Kim, this was back in the 1970s. One of our first gardens, not our first garden. Kim's working on some cucumbers there, and fortunately the picture of me walking away is I'm a bit more in the background there. You don't get to see me in my 1970s cut off shorts there, but these pictures are up here to really just point out that this is something that I've been doing basically my whole life, at least my whole adult life. And even before that, I learned from my mom and my dad on how to provide for ourselves. We've been raising a lot of our own food for a long time. Here's a much more recent picture taken in the summer kitchen that my son and I built with some help from some of our neighbors and friends. Right adjacent to our house. It's a structure that we built that we do a lot of our food preservation in. And it's a more recent picture of Kim with part of our harvest. And we've been doing a lot of canning, preserving, smoking, saving what it is that we produce during any given year for a long time. We're getting pretty good at it. It works well for us. We don't lose very much of what we raise every year. Besides growing a lot of our own food, we work a lot with our own medicinal herbs and other types of things in our gardens, not only for for culinary needs, but for medicinal needs. We'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit. I've been keeping bees. Here's another picture from either the very, very early 80s or probably the 70s. I've been keeping bees for a long time, and I got to say it was a lot easier back then. It's a little bit more difficult. It's a little trickier today. I'm having a hard time keeping my bees to winter through every year. We also heat our house exclusively, almost completely, with wood. This last few days that we've had here that have been so cold, our house has been ranging between 72, 74, even as high as 76 degrees, and I'm using about as much electricity to produce that heat as you would use probably for one 100-watt light bulb. Something that I'm going to touch on a little later in my talk, but we'll just mention briefly as far as getting you a little bit of background about myself, is that I'm also a volunteer firefighter in my local community. Kind of happened in reverse. Very often what happens, especially in a volunteer firefighting situation, first responders, the dads get their sons involved. In this particular case, my son Adam got me involved. He was very, very involved with our local fire department for quite a few years before he got me involved. And I'm going to speak a bunch more about that in a little bit. Like I say, I'm really not that much different than anyone else that's sitting here in that room today, in this room today. But I do have some experience, perhaps more than some of you that are here today, with working with my hands. I am able to build things and fabricate things and make things happen very often out of just scrap material that might be laying around or that I can scrounge from different places. I am a carpenter by trade, have been since I was very, very young, and I was a contractor for very many years in the Lehigh Valley where I live, and I was also a teacher of carpentry and building trades for a number of years before I decided that I was going to go back into my own business and found it to be a little bit better way to make a living. Like I touched upon earlier, I'm really here today. We'll talk some specifics, but it's a lot more about the philosophy, about just getting started in a direction of being much more self-reliant and much less reliant on others to provide for you even your most basic needs. It's one of the things that concerns me the most. And again, I'll keep going back to that throughout my talk today. Throughout the years, I followed along with the Mother Earth News and other publications on self-reliance and country living for forever. I've just done it for a long time and have picked up a lot of hints that way. Now, if anyone in the audience has seen any of the television shows that my family and I have been on, these are the two shows that my family and I were involved with. You kind of have a pretty good idea of the types of things that we're attempting to do and what we are doing. I think it's probably good to tell you how I got involved in television, and I'll be touching back on this a little later on as well. The whole aspect of self-reliance and doing it on television. Something we'll touch back on again in a little bit. But it was about 10 years ago when I was a contractor, as I said, maybe longer than that now, maybe like 12 years ago. I was doing a major renovation with a number of other contractors on a log cabin, a very historic building in Pennsylvania. And the folks that were involved, the customers for that particular project, invited one of the home makeover shows to come in and document the process of this historic restoration. And during that process and working with the camera crews, and as a matter of fact, some of the folks that are here shooting this today were there then, if I'm not mistaken, and during that process and at the end of that overall restoration, the producers of that television show invited me down to Philadelphia to the production company and offered me a behind-the-scenes job on a home makeover show. And that's basically what I've been doing for income ever since. A number of different types of home makeover shows. I do a lot of the carpentry behind the scenes, work very closely with the designers and the on-camera carpenters to make that work happen during the course of however long we have to shoot that particular episode. In other words, everybody has to do something for a living, and that's what I found myself doing for the last 10 years, or a little longer now. And I tell you that, and we'll let that aside now, just so you get an idea as to why and how it came about me and getting my family involved in actually doing a television show. You know, why a television show? I have been doing this kind of lifestyle for a long, long time, but having worked behind the scenes in television, it made me think. The more and more of these shows that I'm working on and the carpentry that I'm doing, it seems as though on a regular basis it got to be more and more and more, had to bring in something eco-friendly, something green, something that was good for our ecology. And I got to thinking to myself, why can't we go beyond eco-friendly, beyond being energy efficient, to being self-sufficient? And that's where I came up with the idea for the television show, and that we've been fortunate enough to do for the last several years. I have been very concerned for a long, long time on how reliant our whole culture is, our whole society is. Our country was built on independence, not dependence. And that's a key that I think we all need to take to heart and remember. We were built on independence, not dependence. And it seems that more and more, especially over the last 50 years or so in my lifetime, just in my lifetime, we have become a society that is totally reliant on someone else to provide for even our most basic needs. And the vast majority of our population wouldn't know the first thing to do, unfortunately, if the infrastructure, which I'm about ready to start talking about, were to crumble around us. Again, in the little clip that was shown in the beginning, you could see it was a lot of infrastructure being discussed, how power failures, water supply problems. These are the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about tonight. It was just 1 or 2 generations ago where people were so much more self-reliant. It was just the way life was. And I'm not suggesting in any way that we take a step back. I'm not in any way saying that we should remove ourselves from the conveniences that we have today. All I'm saying is take a good look at how reliant you may be on the infrastructure that's been built up around us, and try to make some changes to make yourself a little less reliant and a bunch more self-sufficient. What I'm attempting to do, and have been somewhat successful in doing, with my family, my neighbors, and a small community of people that I've put together over the last few years, is to develop an alternative infrastructure, if you will. An infrastructure to put in place for each, and we'll discuss each and every one of the aspects of the infrastructure that everyone is so reliant on. We're putting together our own alternative infrastructure and putting some redundancies into that system, some backups to our backups, so that when things fail, we have something to fall back on. That's really what our show is all about. And I believe there's a clip going to be shown at this point. Am I correct?
I'm not crazy. I want to build a vehicle that will run on nothing more than water. While I'm firing it up, hit that shake. Alrighty. You alright? We had a small The vehicle can run on anything that's...
My name is Frank, and I'm not crazy.
I want to build a vehicle that will run on nothing more than wood.
While I'm firing it up, hit that shaker.
Alrighty. You alright?
We had a small incident. There's some hot gas in there that wants to burn.
The vehicle can run on anything that's carbon-based. We could run the thing on horse shit if we wanted to.
The way I understand it, that gasification generator can work on almost any organic material. And one thing we got a lot of around here is horse shit. And I think I'm going to put Adam to work gathering it up, drying it, and provide some of our own fuel. I think it'd be actually a lot easier than having to cut down and grind up trees.
He's crazy. He wants me to go out and get a goat in case there's some sort of milk shortage or grocery emergency.
We bought some goats to feed ourselves.
Mom?
What?
It just shit on the floor.
Frank!
We're going to dry that, Kim, and we're going to use it for fuel. We're going to dry it in the oven.
In my oven.
He's always working on something and kind of scheming to come up with these new ideas. Okay, here we go. I think it's working. Sometimes it works.
Holy sh...
And sometimes it doesn't.
The hell?
Holy sh... It is on fire. Just let it go. Just leave it in there. I'm the kind of guy that wants to depend on himself. This country is the greatest country in the world, and it was founded on independence, not dependence.
Just some clips of some of the projects and individual things that we had done as a family, using friends and neighbors to help, to begin to put in place some of the different aspects of our infrastructure that we all rely so much on. We'll talk about some of those components, a little bit of the infrastructure itself, and then we'll go ahead and talk about some of the things specifically that we have done. You really, whenever you're thinking about needs, what people's needs would be, you really got to start with the most basic. Water. Water and then shelter are probably the two most basic needs that anybody would have. I mean, you can't survive without water, and it certainly is very, very difficult to survive without adequate shelter. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we have put into place for those aspects of our infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, as part of shelter, you can look at heat. We provide still today, it's just normal. I mean, it's just the way we live our lives. The vast majority of our heat is provided, by us by burning wood that we harvest every year ourselves and heat our home with, as well as we use it as a fuel for our gasification generators. We provide a lot of our own food. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that we provide all our own food. We don't do that yet. But if we were in a situation where we couldn't go to the grocery store, we would do just fine with what we've got set aside already. In terms of power, we're going to talk about some of the things, briefly, some of the things that we have done to provide for our own electric power needs. And right now I'll mention that that's really the weakest, most dangerous aspect of the infrastructure that we all rely on so heavily, is our electric power grid. Just the other day, I think it was the Delaware County Emergency Management sent out through the 911 system, sent out, my son Adam was able to receive it. He got a page concerning it because of some of the volunteer fire departments that he's involved with, that there was potential for roving blackouts up to 30 minutes long in Philadelphia and Delaware counties. And I don't believe any of them occurred, but we were that close just 2 days ago to another blackout situation. PP&L up in the Lehigh Valley had reached a record of the amount of power that was being drawn through the lines, and we're asking people to conserve. Just 2 days ago, this was occurring. If anything could have happened within that infrastructure, anything physically happened, one piece of the wheel, one piece of the cog were to break for some reason just the other day, we could have had a major power failure just 2 days ago. We're going to also talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in terms of providing our own transportation needs instead of relying on the infrastructure that's available or is what most folks rely on now. We have to touch upon security and defense, and we'll talk about that a bit. It's where the kinds of things that anybody who is striving to be self-reliant, you start getting into terms like preppers or some of the other terms that are out there for folks, the survivalists, those kind of things. I try to avoid those kind of labels when I'm speaking because they sometimes have a connotation to them, but you do need to consider issues of how you're going to secure and defend what it is that you've set aside for your family and your small group, your alternative community that you're trying to develop. We'll touch upon that a little bit in just a little while here. And we'll also touch upon some medical self-care, some of the things that we do to take care of our own medical needs in case we can't rely on that infrastructure that's out there for us now. Are we showing another video here at this point? Very good. I'm sorry, folks. Again, this is all new to me, this whole PowerPoint thing, and hopefully, you know, I'm doing okay so far.
One of the most basic human needs is good, safe drinking water. What I'm working on here today is a very simple system for killing the bacteria in water using the ultraviolet light from the sun. A system that's approved by the World Health Organization for third world countries, using ultraviolet light from the sun to kill all the bacteria present in drinking water. And this system does work. I've had the water tested after I purified it by using this method, and it came back perfectly potable. Basically what it does, it uses reflective sunlight to kill all the bacteria in the water. The more sunlight, the faster it works. Basically, I've just simply built a wooden frame and attached this corrugated metal to it. Now all I'm going to do is very quickly screw on a couple of pieces of 2x4 to act as legs to support this piece on an angle so that it can gather the sunlight in a most efficient way. Now this here is part of my rain harvesting system that's tied onto the back of the summer kitchen that we built. Gathers all the rainwater off the roof. But those are all subjects we can talk about in future videos. For right now, I'm going to show you how we can go ahead and take some of this rainwater out of this system. Simply right now I'm just putting it into a plastic water jug. What we're doing is we'll take the solids out of the rainwater just by filtering it through some cheesecloth, and then by treating it with the system that we're building right now using ultraviolet light, we'll kill the bacteria. So once you have your water gathered from whatever source you're getting it from, the next step is to go ahead and kill the bacteria in it. Again, simply fill clear plastic or glass containers with your water. And then by placing it in the sun, direct sunlight, the longer the better. But if you get at least 24 hours, give it a good full day, maybe 2 days of sunlight on it, you can pretty much rest assured that the bacteria has been killed by the ultraviolet light in the sunlight. So here you can see how it really works. We have our corrugated metal really drawing a lot of sunlight today. As you can tell, all the reflectivity coming off of all this. You can see how the light is just absolutely reflecting through that water. You give this a day or two of direct sunlight, and all the bacteria in it will be killed. When all else fails,
This is a method that's approved by the World Health Organization to purify questionable drinking water. You may need it someday.
Now, one of the things that I tried to show there, but we really didn't get into too far, because again, our time is very limited here this evening, was that you didn't necessarily need to have a big old piece of shiny corrugated metal and all kinds of bottles, like, you know, you didn't have to. If you didn't have that available to you in an emergency situation, you could simply just use some tin foil. You could use a mirror. You could use some pie plates, and you can purify, kill the bacteria in that harvested water, whether you're gaining it through rainwater collection, or if you're taking it from a questionable source, a pond or a creek or something like that. If you've got good creek water and you're concerned that it might have some bacteria in it, you put it in the ultraviolet light of the sun for a couple of days, and it will kill the bacteria that's in it and make it safe for drinking. Now, it doesn't take out any chemicals or any kind of pollutants like that, but it will kill the bacteria in it. I guess what I'll start talking about now is how dangerous it is to rely on the infrastructure. We'll start talking a little bit more specifically about the infrastructure. Yeah, I guess the best way to do it is the way that this graph is broken up here is on the left you have the existing infrastructure that everyone and we all rely on so much. Some of the ideas for some alternatives that my family and I have put into place and what we've done as some backups. We get our water from our existing infrastructure is from a well. We have a well on our property. Many other people obviously will have city-provided water, but the fact of the matter is it's really not all that different. If the power fails, I don't get any water. If there's reasons why water is no longer supplied to your home through the city, it doesn't really matter, I mean, what the reasons are. If you're without water, you're without water. So that's why I put that our infrastructure now at our home is that we have our water in a well. What we do for a backup is we have a generator. We'll touch upon that. I think we'll talk about it right now. It's probably a good idea for how much we are so reliant on the electric grid for everyone to have some form of backup generating system. Now, you might say, well, yeah, that's maybe possible if you have our own separate home, but if I live in a condo community, I may not be able to have a generator. If I live in an apartment, I may not be able to have a generator. My answer to you is that yes, you can. There are alternatives to a gasoline or a diesel power generator. My family and I have two relatively large generators. We not only can power our home, but we also power several of our neighbors' homes. During the last period of time, we were like 4 or 5 days without electricity. But as far as the backup to a standard generator, or what you might want to use if you didn't have the place or the space to have a large generator, is a very simple solar generator. Solar generators are readily available on the market now. They're a little expensive. I'm in the process right now of actually building one for my daughter's home. Basically just taking some solar energy, storing it in several batteries, and using a standard power inverter. All the kinds of things that are readily available at a home center. You can make your own solar generator. I've done it. And will be videos coming out that show how I've done that and provide some electricity. Now, you may not be able to power everything, but you can provide yourself with some emergency lighting, some means of preparing food, and as well as means of being able to obtain news and having some information being able to come into you from the amount of power that you can produce with a solar generator. So again, jumping onto the generator, but again, our backup to our well and our generator is our rain harvesting system that you just saw. Our shelter, of course, is our home, but as far as our alternative for our infrastructure. We built a bunker, in which is, if you watched our show, you saw the bunker that we put in, and there's also be more information about that on our website. That is an alternative to our home. If our home were to be compromised, we have our bunker to fall back into. And as a backup to our backup, we have the availability to leave, grab our grab-and-go bags and leave and go off to another location where we can have a camper or some sort of a setup where we have something to fall back to if things get really, really bad. We heat our home with electric. Our home is completely electric, but we use passive solar as our backup through the south side of our house, as well as our redundancy, the wood stoves, to back up everything else. Again, our existing infrastructure, our alternative, and our backup to our backup. As far as our existing infrastructure, we get our food from a grocery store, just like everybody else does. But we also have stored a significant amount of dehydrated food. It's all readily available. It's all stuff that's a little costly, but I think well worth the investment in terms of having some food to back up if you can't get to the store or if the stores are closed down. Again, I don't want to digress here, but one power failure within hours, you're not going to be able to get anything from your grocery store within hours. Everybody's going to run to grab what's there. Even during a snowstorm, that happens now. You can hardly get a loaf of bread. And it used to be, years ago, that there was a storeroom in the back of the grocery store. They would go to the back of the store and they'd pull off the stuff in the boxes and they'd bring it out and stock the shelves. It's not the way business is done anymore. What's on the shelves is what's in the store. When it's gone, it's gone. And if there's no way for the trucks to roll in because they can't get the fuel that they need because the power's not working to pump it into their trucks, you're going to be without food really, really fast. So we have stored dehydrated food, and we back that up with our own canned foods, our own chickens, our goats, preserved smoking meats, all the different things that we do to help provide for that part of the infrastructure if the existing one were to collapse. We rely on our electric grid. We have the generators. As I talked about earlier, I jumped ahead, but we also have the portable solar generators that I talked to you about, as well as a small wind turbine that we also use to charge batteries. Transportation. What we've done is, of course, we have our regular cars and we go to the gas station to get the gas that we need to get around from day to day, just like everyone else. But I built with my son, a downdrafting gasification generator that you saw some clips of earlier in the back of the wood-burning truck, where Adam was lighting it. It kind of flashed over a little bit when he was working on it. We actually have a vehicle that its backup is that it can run on gasoline, it can run on propane, or it can run on any organic material. Mostly wood chips is what we burn in it. As far as security defense, again, it starts to get a little controversial, but let's face it, folks. If things got really bad and things got really ugly really fast, people trying to take what they didn't have, our existing infrastructure, as far as law enforcement, is going to be overwhelmed. It's very, very unlikely that it would not be if it was over a large area. When that system begins to get overwhelmed by everything that's going on, it falls down to yourself to be able to defend, secure what it is that you have. We have a bunker that we built. It's very secure. It's very secretive. Although, I'll touch on this a little later, it's kind of counterintuitive that I'm doing this all in the public eye on television. But that's one of our security aspects, is our very secure bunker and our armory. We have a very secure section of our home that's virtually impossible to get into, that is very safe in terms of caring for your firearms and making sure that they do not fall into the hands of either a young person that is not familiar with them or a criminal that would could get their hands on them. We have a very secure storage place for our firearms, and we spend time knowing those weapons, knowing those tools, I'll say, and being familiar with their use and their safe, proper usage. And we also have gone on to taking some defensive training as far as self-defense, target-focused training, as well as we reload a lot of our own ammunition, and virtually we make our own black powder. And I have muzzle-loading firearms that I can fall back on where I can make my own powder, I can make my own projectiles, and put food on my table. I don't know if I'd want to use them for defense, but we have other tools for that defensive purpose if, God forbid, the need should ever come into place or ever occur. Now, as far as medical self-care, obviously everybody, you know, something's wrong, you're sick, something's bothering you, you go to the doctor, just like everybody else, that's what we do. But we store a lot of our own medical supplies, suture kits, all kinds of different medications, over-the-counter type medications that you might need in a first aid situation. And besides all that and having that equipment and materials stored away in a very safe, secure place, which I recommend everyone do, we also have our own holistic treatments and remedies. We grow a lot of our own medicinal herbs, which not only will serve us well for minor issues and even somewhat major issues, as I think you're going to see a little later on, but it's also a very good barterable item, having those kind of things. It's something we'll touch upon in a little bit. I think I'm probably going a little over in time, so I'm going to try and step it up a little bit. Okay. Again, you need to build redundancies and backups into your system so that if you find yourself in a protracted loss or collapse of our infrastructure, that those backups that you have in place will definitely become necessary. It's really important, and I haven't really touched on it enough yet, that you develop relationships with other like-minded people. Nobody can stay awake 24 hours a day to do all the things that are necessary to try and keep your existence, you know, healthy and productive in a problem situation. You can't stay awake doing all that's necessary and trying to protect what it is that you have from someone that might be trying to come and take it. And it's equally important that you have people that you can work with as a group that have some knowledge. I'll put it this way. There's no one that really should be excluded from that group. Everyone has something that they can offer to any kind of a survival situation or a community of people that are trying to live a self-sufficient lifestyle. It could be, if you have a dentist or a doctor, that's great. But even if you have an older person or someone that may not be physically able to do a lot of work, they certainly can keep records. They can continue with the education of the children. They can keep accurate logs and barter transactions. There are many, many things that anyone could do, and there's every part of the infrastructure that has collapsed is going to need to have someone put back into that place to help it continue on. Also, as what was just up there, is bartering. If you have a community of people that you're working with, that's when barter can come into play. Some of the food that you raise, tobacco, like I raise tobacco, I make my own cigarettes, we can a lot of our own food, as you've already heard me say, that those kind of items will have value in a cashless society. And if you have a group of people that you're working with and are like-minded that you can go to, this is where the barter can really come into play. I touched upon it briefly a couple of seconds ago about how I talked about how it's almost counterintuitive that I'm doing this on a television show. A lot of people are survivalists, would say that, you know, this guy's out of his mind. Why is he showing people what it is that he has and that he's putting aside for himself and for his family? They're just going to come and try to take it from him. Well, there's validity to that statement. That's valid. And what I'm doing is not in opposition, and I'm in no way judgmental of folks that are much more, I'll use the word radical, maybe. People could use that term, although I'm hesitant to do so, in terms of how they feel their survival needs to be maintained. I'm not being judgmental against that. There's very valid everything they say is very, very valid. It's true. What I'm talking about is that doing the TV show, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get people who haven't really thought about this kind of stuff, who haven't really thought about how reliant they are, who haven't really thought about what would I do if the electric failed or whatever the scenario may be. Trying to get those folks to start thinking about it and start putting some things into place one step at a time. And to the survivalists, I would say the more people that I can reach and get started in this process of being much more self-reliant, the less people we're going to have to deal with who are roaming around aimlessly trying to take what it is that we have set aside for ourselves. That's the way I look at it now. Maybe I'm naive, but that's the way I look at it. And like I said, I'm no different than anyone else that's sitting out here in this audience today. And it's my goal to reach out to as many people as I can to get them started on that path. This is a process. It is a process. It takes time. Like I said, I've been doing this for years, but all it takes is the desire. Just the thought that maybe there's something to what this guy is saying, and I'm going to get started on the road to be more self-reliant, and that's my goal. Again, I touched upon developing relationships with other like-minded people. Join a volunteer fire department. There's something I've been neglecting a little bit in my talk. Do I got time, guys? Am I close? 5. When my son got me involved in a volunteer fire department, I never realized how valuable that was going to be for me. The training that we both get as far as emergency response, whether it is in vehicle rescue or going to a commercial or a residential structure that's on fire, the training that you get to deal with those kinds of incidents is so incredibly valuable for someone who is trying to prepare themselves for a self-sufficient lifestyle, who needs to be concerned about what can I do for my infrastructure in terms of dealing with emergency situations if I can no longer rely on an overwhelmed emergency response system. Not only that, the training, being on these scenes and these incidents that occur, especially motor vehicle accidents, entrapments, those kind of things, the confidence that you build from having experienced more than once an emergency situation and dealing with it calmly and with the training that you've received, it's immeasurable, the value of that. And speaking of confidence, and I'll start to wrap it up here now, there's sort of a fringe benefit to doing all this. If you're fortunate enough to have children and you're working with your family when you're doing these kinds of projects, there's a bonding that occurs from doing things together as a family, number one. But number two is a little deeper. So many of our young people today really don't have the experience of starting on a project and working through the step-by-step process to get to the end of that project. For example, planting a garden, putting a seed in the ground, going through a whole summer season, tending that plant, making sure and then that it's healthy, harvesting that food, and then enjoying it as a family. That process is something that's missing in a lot of young people's lives these days. Getting your family involved, this is a fringe benefit to all this. In this process, working on these projects together from start to finish has immeasurable value and will serve them well in the rest of their lives. You can take it from me, this is true. One more video I think we want to show you talking about here about the medical self-care, because I think my time is getting close.
Dental insurance at all, so I can't really, I really don't want to go to the dentist and spend all kind of money. I had this problem with the one behind the one with the root canal, and what I did when it had a cavity in it is I just simply took, this is about 2 months ago, I took whole cloves, which is an old-fashioned remedy, and you just pack it inside the cavity, and it really helps with the pain. And what I did is I actually peeled off a little bit of my beeswax and packed it around it to hold it in there. And lo and behold, after about a week or so, the pain went away from the tooth. And I think what it did is it might have abscessed out the bottom because it's been 2 months and never had any pain with it again. And now this tooth is dead and it's cracked, it's broken. And what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to go ahead and attempt to pull it out. Going to purify that, and then to help with the pain, we'll do that. Let's take a look at this thing. It's been about 45 minutes or so. I've changed my packing twice with the garlic, cloves, and honey mixture wrapped in the gauze. Pain is very, very, very minimal, and the bleeding has stopped. You can see that there's very, very, very little blood on the gauze. The system seems to work. I mean, I'm taking care of myself and not relying on anybody else to do it for me. I think I'll have another shot of whiskey, call it a night.
What I did, folks, is garlic. Many of you some may be aware, is highly medicinal. Garlic is incredible in terms of an internal antibiotic as well as a topical antibiotic. And so what I did is I crushed up garlic and I mixed it with honey. Honey also acts as an antibiotic because of the fact that it has a low moisture content. Any bacteria that it gets in association with honey has its moisture sucked out of it. Now, I don't think it would work very well in a moist environment of your mouth because of the honey will gain moisture from that. But it tastes good, and it also helps to heal a wound. Honey is very healing. So basically what I did is I just crushed up a lot of garlic, mixed it with honey, wrapped it up in gauze, and bit down on it for several hours. And then every day, for the next 2 days, I would rub some garlic on it as well as a little bit of honey, and I never had a problem with it. Never had another problem with it again. I really want to thank you. I'm pretty sure my time is up here now. Thank you for being patient with me and tolerant for me. You know, this is all new to me, being out. I'm used to just getting down and getting dirty and starting on a project, building it until it's completed. And I have no problem doing that in front of a camera, but this is a little bit different for me speaking, especially with this screen here. I want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for taking the time to come out here and listen to what I have to say. I'm currently working on a series of videos, and hopefully we'll continue to be working on those different videos that will be available on our website, and also through a company called Reboot Marketing, which I am behind schedule with in finishing up a couple of videos, one on a solar generation system and one on home security and defense. So hopefully they'll be done quickly and get them out and, for you folks. Thank you. That's all I can say. Thanks so much, folks, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Keep you up here, Frank.
Yep.
Welcome some questions after these question and answer period. We're going to take a 15-minute break because I notice there's a lot of food back there. So welcome everyone to enjoy some food before our next speaker. And, maybe on the break, if you're free, if anyone needs a tooth extracted, that's an option. But we'd like you to ask some questions.
Please. It's always easier for me to answer questions as well.
Frank, I have a question.
In the back, Daryl.
You talk about reaching out to your neighbors. What's the best way to do that? What would you recommend? I mean, you live in a neighborhood, you say hi to your neighbors sometimes, and how do you get them together? I mean, is there a trick to it?
That's really a really good question. It's really not that difficult with this topic, with this subject of self-reliance. It's really not that difficult to strike up a conversation with someone that you never met before, let alone one of your neighbors. People are beginning to see more and more how it's probably a good idea to be a little bit more self-reliant, and people are beginning to be a little bit more aware of some of the problems that are going on around them in terms of issues with infrastructure as well as storms, and the news media has a lot of, it's easy, I guess is the best way to put it, to really strike up a conversation on this particular topic. And most people really initially will think that, this guy may have a screw or two loose, but after you start to show them some of the things that you're doing, they usually will scratch their head and say there's some merit to what this guy's got going on. So to answer your question, how do you reach out to someone? How do you bring people together? It's just simply do it. Be friendly. Start showing people and tell people some of the things that you're doing or thinking about doing, and you'll be surprised how quickly many people will want to get involved. And the more that want to get involved, more will follow. It seems to build very quickly. Did I answer your question? Yes. Go ahead.
What is the shelf life of these things that you're canning and the dehydrated foods?
Another really, really good question. Shelf life on the things that we're canning and dehydrating. Just yesterday, I swear this is all true, I just opened up a bottle of applesauce that was from 2011. That's the longest I ever have kept anything. That's over 2 years now. And I was very careful when I opened it. I looked at the lid to make sure that it was still sucked down, that no air had gotten into the applesauce that was in there. It popped when I opened it, smelled it, looked at it, looked for any kind of fizzing, any kind of bubbling, and then I just started taking a couple of small tastes. Ate the whole jar of applesauce yesterday, never had any kind of repercussion from it. It was perfect. So I would say normal, 1 year. Try to have everything you produce from your garden and can 1 year. In your freezer, if you're going to rely on the freezer, we do freeze a lot of stuff. We have the emergency backup generators if we need them. I would say you could probably go a year and a half to 2 years. But I really wouldn't go much further than that unless you absolutely had to. Try to plan it out so that you can use up what you've made any given year during that year. And if you have any extra, there's always makes nice gifts.
I'm curious about your wife and your family. It's all great that you had this idea to be taking a survivalist, self-reliant approach. How did you get them to buy in and go along with this? And were they ever reluctant?
Absolutely reluctant. And some of the things that were very clearly shown on the episodes of the shows that we did was that there was a lot of pushing back. It seems as if, for the most part, my son Adam was more on board with some of the things I had going on because he was just excited by everything that was going on. And my daughter Emma and my wife Kim were somewhat more reluctant. But just like when you reach out to other people and start talking to them about the kinds of things that you're doing, initially, they really think you might be a little squirrely. But as time goes on and it starts to make a little bit more sense and they see things occurring, I think I can speak for my wife when I say, I mean, she's here, she can speak for herself. I think I can say that she did get on board with the vast majority of all the things that we're doing, because they began to make more and more and more sense. It's not easy. It's really not easy to try and provide for all your own needs. And it's not something in today's world that you can really do all the time, because you got to go out and make a living. You can't be, like these last week or so, I've been fueling the fires, keeping the fires, but I wasn't, I start work again day after tomorrow. What I'm getting at is that if you get your systems in place, if everything falls to crap around us, they're there. And now you are home because you can't go nowhere anyhow. You can keep those fires going and you can do all the things that are necessary to, it's not easy. It's not easy to try and provide for your own needs. And I guess I'll speak for my wife when I say that that's probably one of the biggest pushbacks, is that it's sure a heck of a lot easier to get down to the grocery store and get yourself a block of cheese than it is to milk the goats and make your own.
So the videos that are being shown on the screen, are these going to be shown on your website, franksnewindependence.com?
Yes.
And then will you have things like tutorials if I wanted to look up how to do some of these things?
Basically, we're just getting that all off the ground. That's one of the main reasons why I'm here today. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. All those things over the upcoming weeks and months should be up and running on the website. Yes?
The biggest misconception, especially with generators, you see all these people running out there, that if the power goes out and you can't get fuel, that's the first thing. The pumps are electric.
That's exactly right.
You're just, in that question, most people don't want to store fuel because we're all scared about fuel.
Sure.
Especially if it's a storm, whatever like
Sure.
that. What do you do at that point? I mean, that's a good question, especially to the average home person that doesn't want to keep that dangerous fuel around.
Absolutely. You have a small generator, let's say. Nothing too huge. Just a standard little small generator that you can use to power a few things in your house, and you have the tank in that full. And you have maybe another can of gas sitting around that you would use in your lawnmower anyhow. Maybe. I heard a little buzz. I think I'm going to step away if it's that or not. I'm not sure. Keep going. What I'm getting at is that, yeah, you don't want to store a lot of fuel. The question is now the use of the generator. What I've done in the past is one tank of fuel in a generator that I had lasted me for the 5-day period, which Superstorm Sandy thing that we had a while back. We were without power for 5 days. And like I said, not only my house, but 2 of my neighbors as well, because I have 2 different generators. You don't run it all the time. If you're in an emergency situation, you don't have to have power 24 hours a day. You take that generator, in my case, you let it run for a half hour, the refrigerator gets cold, the freezer gets cold, the well gets charged. I now have enough water in the tank that I can, cook with, clean with a little bit. You can't be taking showers and stuff, but you've got enough usable water. To answer your question is how wisely you use your generator as part of your overall plan. You'll be surprised how long you can make that little bit of gas last, because you're 100% correct. When the power goes out, you're not going to get any more.
Okay, if we can just have one more question.
Thank you.
Our generation
generator is with LP gas, and it doesn't get stale. So we're quite happy.
a liquid petroleum, if you have, excuse me, a propane generator, awesome. Now you're really doing well. That's exactly the kind of thing that you work up to over a period of time. Did you have that right at the beginning, or did you work up to that? Exactly. That's the things that you learn as you're going along. You have a liquid propane generator, and the gas is not going to go stale. Propane can stay in that cylinder for years and years and years and years. And when you fire up that generator, it's quiet, it's clean, it's efficient. And I bet you, if you have a sizable tank of propane, oh my, you could go probably, if you use that generator wisely, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I bet you can go for a year.
Well, we can, I believe full power, it's 3 gallons per hour. 3 gallons per hour.
So now if you used it, an hour a day or 2 hours a day to keep your well charged, to keep your freezers from melting down, for the food that you have stored, your refrigerators, things like that, if you have well water, and then you use your flashlights and maybe you have a little solar generator you back up with, candles, that kind of thing, the rest of the time, months, guarantee you'd be able to go for months like that. It's not that difficult. Anybody can do it. We'll end it with that. Anybody can do it. You just have to get started, have that desire, get started, and begin the process. Thank you all so much.